I'll tell you when. Okay, you're now live, Chair.
Good evening and welcome, members of the public, to this meeting of the Standards Committee. This meeting is being held virtually in accordance with Part 2 of the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panel's Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meetings in England and Wales Regulations 2020 and the Council's Supplementary Council Procedure Rules. In summary, these regulations were brought in response to the coronavirus epidemic. They remove the requirement for members to be physically present in the room. They allow us to debate, participate and vote through remote video conferencing while observing the social distancing measures needed to restrict the spread of the virus. Could I please ask all members and officers to observe the following principles? Please could you just mute your microphone and turn off your video unless I indicate and call upon you to speak. And also, once you have spoken, please just turn off your microphone as well, because it does interfere with the meeting. We may not be able to hear each other. At the start of the meeting, if you want to speak and contribute to the agenda, please indicate through the MS Teams chat channel if you wish to speak, and I will keep an eye on that and call upon you. I may of course use my discretion according to the demands of the agenda and may not allow multiple people to speak on the same item again, unless it's a different opinion. So just remind you, unless you're going to say something different, please don't come back in ideally. In terms of voting, for a small meeting we will ask each councillor in turn. In terms of, we don't have this today, but in terms of voting for a large meeting, the votes will be determined by a consensus. If there is no consensus, voting will be carried out by a roll call. So thank you. That's my opening remarks, but just like to remind everybody, this is a live meeting. So please, can you your comments reflect the etiquette of the Standards Committee and behaviour. And other than that, I want us to relax as much as possible in a virtual meeting. And could I just also quickly point out two of our independent members, Stuart and Paul. We can't see them on screens. If you could please just shout up, please, Stuart and Paul, if you want to come in, because I won't be able to see if you need to comment on any item. I will check in on you from time to time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I could just also mention, we've now got a further caller on the phone if they just wish to introduce themselves for you, Chair.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Alan Eastwood. I'm also on telephone because although I have the Microsoft software, I can't get through somehow, but there we go.
Okay, welcome, Alan. I think you're okay with everything so far. If there's any questions, please do raise your hand. We can try and answer those for those who are calling in via the remote audio mechanism.
If I raise my hand, you won't see me.
No, you'll have to shout up. Thanks, Alan. I'm going to be taking my glasses on and off because I can't then see you, and so bear with me. And if a cat jumps on my laptop, I can't get rid of the cat out of the room. And so, okay. Anyway, just in terms of apologies, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair. We've just got one from Tassadak Hussain.
Thank you. Can we note those? Thanks. Has everybody had a chance to look? Sorry.
Simon, I've just got a text message from Sylvia saying she can't make it.
Oh, okay, because I understand.
Sorry, I broke in.
No, it's okay, thank you. Can we please note those as well, Shannon? And thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting, you've all read them, digested them. I don't propose to go through them all. As you know, we did have some delays in approving some of the recommendations, which we got through at last Thursday's council meeting. Full council meeting. If there's anybody can second those and approve those, we'll move on to our substantive item.
I'm happy to second them.
Thank you, Councillor Kona. Okay, just in terms of before we move on, any declaration of interest? I take that as there's no declarations and I can move on. Yes. Okay. David, anybody indicated? So there's no indications. Okay, in terms of, we're going to move on to item 4, which is our substantive item today. I'm going to bring in David to introduce it, and then I'll propose to go through as many questions of it that we can today. David?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the substantive item for today's meeting is consultation on a new national code of conduct for elected members. So the report in front of you describes how the Local Government Association, the LGA, have worked to bring forward proposals for a new draft model code of conduct, and have invited consultation across the country on what should be contained in this new code of conduct. In the papers that you've got with you this evening is a link to the work that's been undertaken so far, which works back to the original recommendations from the Committee on Standards in Public Life report relating to local government ethical standards. So what you've got in front of you tonight is a series of questions which relate to that new draft code, and that is set out for you in the appendix to the report. And what members are invited to do this evening is to consider the recommendations of the LGA and the draft report, linking back to the public standards report, and answer the consultation questions, whether they wish to answer those consultation questions and for me to reply on behalf of the Standards Committee. That is open to the committee, but bear in mind that the draft consultation is widely open, so therefore any elected member can reply to this consultation document individually. Any member of the public can respond to it individually. Any officer of the council can respond to it individually. This is a wide open consultation and national consultation, but clearly as regards recommendations around what should be in a code of conduct for elected members of councils, no, standards committees across the country will be considering a similar report to what you've got in front of you tonight, Chair. So at that point, I'll hand over back to yourself.
Okay. What I propose we do, it is a substantive item, that I go through question by question. Some of them will move on quite quickly because they're quite straightforward, I believe, but I would like to obviously engage the views of the committee here tonight so that David and I then can go away and work up a response to send out to the wider members of the council. And before I start, is there anybody who's got a burning comment on any particular question? Because if that is a specific issue, I'd like to invite members to contribute to that first. If not, if you're all happy, I'll go through each question on its own, on an individual merit. Please just chip in if you need to speak, because I can't see you or indicate.
There's no indications, Chair.
Okay, well, in that case, I will move on to question 1, which is, to me, I've got a couple of points on that, and I would like members to comment as well. The question relates to how we as councillors behave in the public, and that's both on official business and also when using social media, and the question really is about, many of us will, well, all of us I would imagine, have a number of roles. We're not just councillors, we have our own private roles and activity and private social media platforms, and I wonder if people are happy with what is contained within the initial guidance. Do we need more information on that? My view is we do, to try and separate our roles when we need to, because we wear more than one hat. I wonder if other members have a view on that. Hello?
There are no other indicators at the moment, Chair.
Okay, and in that case, what I will do is I will set out those, David, I know you're keeping notes, so if we could set some of those initial views I've got and put those and then put them out to the wider members. In terms of the question 2, 3, they're quite generic questions really, and I don't have any strong view on them. But apart from maybe question 2, it talks about, does the code of conduct particularly specify or define to members what are legal requirements, what are obligations, and what is guidance. And with the COVID situation, I think that's quite a pertinent area of examination for us today to set. Do we need to be very clear do we need to follow guidance or not, and where does it sit? Where do we sit? What's legal? What's guidance? What's best practice? What's an obligation? I think there is a bit of a grey area there, and we need to maybe explore that further as well. Any views? Yeah.
Chair, it may be inviting our independent persons for a view on that from the respective legal backgrounds.
Well, yes. I'm happy to comment.
Please, thank you.
I'm happy to comment. Shall I comment now?
Please do. I'll allow you all in turn if needs be. Okay. I'm not sure who spoke there. Is that? Could you just introduce yourself because we can't see you?
Yeah, surely. I'm Stuart.
Hi, Stuart.
I'd like to comment, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. Of course.
Yeah, I mean, when I read through the code, I think at a cursory glance, which is sometimes what members will give to the code when they're looking at it quickly, I don't think it is very clear. Upon a closer examination of the code, it might be a little bit more clear. But I think what I would suggest is, why don't we simply have the code just clearly saying what is a legal requirement, what is an obligation, and what is guidance, as opposed to trying to drill down and find out what's going on. It just needs to be very clear. To just say this is a legal requirement, this is an obligation, and this is guidance. That would be my view, having advised in the past.
That's really useful. Alan or Stuart, would you like to come in on that or add your views?
I would, and I'm sorry, Stuart, but I disagree. I just think the whole of the code should be the same, because members need to act in accordance with it, whether it's a legal requirement, whether it's an obligation, or whether it's guidance. They should not be stepping outside of it. It's almost like giving a tiered approach to the code. And as a member, we expect the highest regard to the code, regardless of whether they're going to become the subject of legal proceedings or whether they have breached an obligation or guidance. And therefore, I'm a little bit reluctant to go along saying, abide by this, but this you've got a bit of flexibility in, you can just do it if you want, but, I think it needs to be strict. This is the code, this is what you adhere to, and it's regardless of whether it's legal or whatever. And at the end of the day, even this new code, which the LGA are pushing forward, has no teeth. So abide by.
I certainly agree with that.
Yep. Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
That's fine. I can't see if anybody wants to come in now.
Nobody else has indicated to come in.
Chair, can I just have a word, please?
Yes,
please. Yes, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'd just like to mention that on a number of occasions over the last few years, I've mentioned the requirement or asked what the definition of mandatory is. And the information has been sent out here to confirm that one way or the other. So I think I'm somewhere between Stuart and the last speaker, in that if it's a legal requirement, then excuse me, you're going to suffer legal consequences. If it's just a requirement, what are the consequences going to be if you don't actually conduct yourselves in a requirement of the consequences?
Okay, could I invite any members for opinions on this aspect? And if there's nobody indicating, I think we capture. My own feeling is, first, I think we need to set out what are the as Stuart's indicated, that we do need to separate what's legal, what's not. And then in looking at that, I think we further examine, is Alan's point a valid one? Actually, all of these things really as members, we should be following them anyway. And without actually, they're a little bit abstract at the moment, and without being able to specifically state what those obligations are, I think it's very difficult for some members to comment, and it may put them in a position. And again, it depends on, it's a bit like the coronavirus legislation. If there's contradictory practice out there on a particular issue, we need to be very clear what we're making a legal obligation and stipulating to members that they must do. Because what we don't want to do is inhibit any kind of democracy and freedom of expression and speech, as long as it's lawful, obviously. So I wonder what thoughts are.
Chair, there's nobody indicated to speak at the moment.
In that case, I propose, if you're happy with this, that we set down all three views, and we then put them out to the members as a whole to discuss further. Is that acceptable? So question 3, I think some of those are quite straightforward, so I'm not going to labour on those around should it be personal tense, I will, or passive tense, councillors should. My personal view is I've read the Code of Conduct, and every aspect of it I will abide by it. That's my view, but that is maybe not whether we should be terming it the councillors should. I think that's just something you can all let us know in time, unless somebody wants to speak now on it. Moving on to the question 4, this is quite substantive to me as well. To what extent do you support the 12 specific obligations? Is there any there that are problematic to people or think that should be defined more? Or to our independent members, if there are any that you think are not clear enough?
Joe, it's Stuart.
Yeah,
I'm
Stuart. Yeah.
Well, I'll go first again this time. I think it's probably a little bit more clear in some respects than it was in the old code, well, in the existing code. Probably when we come on to more specific ones, in particular disrepute, I'll comment more on that.
Yeah, sure.
When we come on to it, but I think, from my view, it's probably a little bit more clear than it was before.
Okay.
So there's in the draft code, suggested code, there's some explanation given, perhaps a little bit more in places than others.
Okay.
Maybe Alan has a few.
Okay. I mean, I've got an potential addition. I think I'm of the view that, you know, there's specific obligations there, and I know the code talks about Nolan principles and lawful behaviour, and we'll go back to that when we deal with disrepute, as you mentioned, Stuart. But should we not be stipulating in this code, given what's happening again around us in society, around inclusion, etc., Black Lives Matter, should we not be saying something specifically around abiding by the Single Equality Act requirements? And as councillors, I will be anti-discriminatory in my approach when I am dealing with members of the public, and not allowing my own personal views to influence how I deal with a member of the public. I just wonder if that should be out there, and we should be proactive in saying that. And my view, and I'm going to share it with you, is that we should be saying that, because regardless of our own individual values and beliefs, if people out there want a view to be heard or want us to represent them, we should be in a position to be able to do that. Any thoughts on that?
Sorry, Paul Fletcher here.
Hi, Paul. Please come in.
I'm not really sure what point you're trying to make, to be quite honest.
Well, it talks about a code of conduct, and it talks about lawful behaviour. It talks about treating councillors, employees, representatives, and whoever it might be in a fair manner and treating them fairly. And because this is a code for members, I wonder if we should be more explicit rather than abstract about some of what we're talking about, what we mean by dealing with members of the public? Should we be saying we are anti-discriminatory in our approach and we abide by that? And whether that's LGBT, black, white, it doesn't matter, it's irrelevant, but the Single Equality Act has those protected characteristics. So should we openly state that in the Code of Conduct? That we will abide by those requirements to be anti-discriminatory and not differentiate on any of those protected characteristics and serve the public.
Chair, we've got a question from Councillor Watt.
Please come in. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, yeah.
Can...
Sorry. So my comment, it's not with regards to the point you just made, but it was just about point 7 about disrepute. I think for me, I think that point needs to be expanded more, you know, possibly with an appendix with examples, because I think for me, it's a really important point, and it's something, you know, you do come across, or you may hear from, or when you're dealing with members of the public, when they, you know, refer to examples or previous issues they may have experienced, you know, it's so important that we as elected members are, you know, behaving and conducting ourselves in a professional manner in all aspects of our sort of council life. And I think that that point could be expanded more, or even just given examples of ways we need to, you know, really ensure that, you know, we're giving those strong examples out to the community and to our residents and, you know, to the wider public as well. But that was just all for me, Chair.
No, thank you. That's really useful, Councillor Ruwa. Any more views on that?
Hi, Chair. It's Stuart here.
Hi, Stuart.
Yeah, can I say I do agree. I think the disrepute does come up a bit later on. I think I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
I think there's a specific question on that. Perhaps we could talk about it at that point. But
Perfect.
I have to say, from my experience, dealing with members in my past work, disrepute was one that caused a little bit of grief as to what that might mean. So explanation would be good.
Okay. I mean, is anybody instigating to speak?
No, Chair.
No, just to move on to the next question then, but before we do, I think maybe the point I'm raising around being inclusive, not discriminating, taking anti-discriminatory stance, maybe could fall into that category of disrepute if we don't abide by those. So maybe we can pick it up back there then when we deal with that particular question. Okay, moving on to question 5. That's generic, so I won't labour on that. That's just asking about any alternative obligations, which is what I was raising in terms of equality and being inclusive. Question 6, it's a generic one, so I think that one you can all comment on when we send out the draft, unless somebody's got strong opinions now.
Hi, Chair, it's Asad here.
Hi, Asad. Can you?
I think this is a new one for me, number 6. I don't think it's been. I haven't seen it before in any other courts.
Mm.
So I don't. I'm trying to understand what it's getting at. It's not preventing anyone getting information that they are entitled to by law.
Okay. So maybe that is something we could flag up. We don't understand the relevance of the question, given that in a way, question 1 or one of the other questions that we've discussed does try to. It just asks us anyway, do we want this separating out? So maybe it's asking the question in a different way, that's all. Yep, okay, any other views?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, some of them are quite generic, so I don't really want to labour on too much, you know. They just kind of ask you to what extent do we agree with some of it, acting with civility, for example, question 7. I would imagine to a great extent, that's what a member should be saying. You know, if anybody disagrees, then they have the right to comment on that when we send out the meeting notes. And if there's alternative phrases that anybody wants to suggest today, please do so you know, if you can't do it now, just come in at any point and indicate that you'd like to comment on that. There's quite a few really. Question 7, question 8, question 8A. They're all very much around to what extent do we agree with the certain aspects of the code. I think question 8, we do need to come into that because we've just discussed it around bringing the council into disrepute. Stuart, do you want to come back in on that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When I had a look at this, as far as disrepute is concerned, it referred to, if I remember rightly, not acting honestly or acting deceitfully or something like along those lines.
Yeah, it does.
I think, in my view, it might be more straightforward if there was an actual obligation that actually said very clearly that you will act honestly and not deceitfully. So I'm not probably put that very well, but I think that should be more specific and sort of come out at you, so to speak, on the page. That honesty is very, very important. And it seems to have been tied up a little bit with disrepute, whereas disrepute, I think, is a little bit more general than just honesty. You can bring the council into disrepute in a number of ways, and maybe in the further guidance will explain disrepute in a bit more detail rather than just focusing on, as it seems to me, honesty.
Okay, I agree. Yeah, it is helpful. I mean, I can read out the chapter. I do have it in front of me, just for members who may not have had a sight of it. Basically, chapter 7 of the Code of Conduct, existing Code of Conduct, should I say, states disrepute, not bringing my role or counsel into disrepute, and it's defined as behaviour that is considered dishonest and or deceitful can bring your counsel into disrepute. As a member, you have been entrusted to make decisions on behalf of your community, and your actions and behaviour are subject to greater scrutiny than that of the ordinary members of the public. You should be aware that your actions might have an adverse impact on other councillors and or your council. So, did everybody digest that? I don't know if it's in front of you, but I agree with Stuart, it is a little bit vague, and as Councillor Rawat has already pointed out, it does need spelling out a little bit in terms of different kinds of examples. That honesty is one of them. I mean, my view is if you're, you know, being racist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, you know, homophobic, all of these other aspects are also things that will bring the council into disrepute, and we should be giving maybe some examples of that within the code.
Hi, it's Paul Fletcher again.
Hi, Paul.
I think it goes, well, I agree with what you're saying and what Stuart said, but you could apply disrepute to bullying.
Yes.
Or just equality. I mean, where does disrepute begin and end, really?
Yeah.
It's covered by many other parts of the proposal that's before us today. So I'm not sure where disrepute in that respect begins and ends.
Any other views?
Chair, Alan Eastwood here, independent person. I rolled question 7 and question 8 together. I think the word civility is awkward. And my view would be that you treat everyone with respect. Rolling that into question 8, you respect your council and don't be disrespectful to it. And you don't need 2 separate bits. You know, you have an obligation to your council. You have to uphold their citizens and treat them with the utmost respect. And respect, I think, is a very strong word, which is omitted from what they're putting forward now.
Okay. Any other views? Any thoughts?
Hi, Chair. It's Stuart again.
Hi, Stuart.
Can I just say that actually, look at my papers, I've got civility, a line through civility, and I put respect. So I think to some extent I do agree with what Alan is suggesting there. That doesn't seem like a good approach.
Okay. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So that's partially answering question 7, isn't it? To talk about acting with respect as opposed to civility. Please correct me if I've misunderstood anybody.
No, you're spot on, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments for other members around some of these aspects of respect and what can bring the council into dispute, or if there's any suggestions that we need to be covering specifically? And I agree with you know, the points around how much of this can you cover, how many case studies can you cover. I think it can be a living document that standards committees can pick up as issues emerge and learn from issues that emerge. That's my view, that we have that flexibility to locally spell out some of those issues as well, not just nationally. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on. Please just, if I miss anybody, David, please just alert me to it. I'm really mindful it's quite difficult in a virtual setting to see who wishes to speak. Councillor Rawat, did you want to, sorry, forgive me, did you want to come back in on the issue of disrepute?
Hi, Chair. No, I think I'm okay. I think it's the other speakers covered, you know, similar points that I was thinking of. But I think the point that you mentioned about having it as a ongoing sort of point to discuss, I think is quite important. Because I noticed within the documents it discusses social media, and I've been thinking about it, and social media is forever evolving. So some of us may have Snapchat, but now there's things like TikTok, things even like your own WhatsApp now has the ability to share stories and things like that. So things are forever changing, and I think it's right for us to not scrutinize, but, you know, just to be aware of the ever evolving nature of social media. And it has many benefits, we know, but there can be disadvantages and people use it in the incorrect manner. So I think it would be good to, you know, just have, you know, to check in with it every now and again.
Thank you, Councillor Rawat, for your good points there. Thank you. If we carry on to question 9, again, I'm quite happy to take them in bulk. If I just go through them, maybe. So question 9 relates to the definition of bullying and harassment. Question 10 is the reference to the use of social media, which Councillor Rawat has just raised, and should social media be covered in a separate code or integrated into the overall code of conduct? So if I take those 3 points kind of together, are there any particular views? Other than if anybody wants to reinforce a view, by all means, raise your hand and I'll let you in.
Chair, the Councillor Cornat.
Councillor Cornat.
Sorry, Chair. I think I raised my hand.
Oh, apologies.
Yeah, I think I couldn't see. But my point really was going back onto the previous minutes. So perhaps when we finish right at the bottom, we'll go back to that. So I don't want to disturb the conversation at the moment.
So I'm okay with you coming in now if it was about previous point. That's not a problem.
Okay. When I pressed Q, my question was, I seconded you on the minutes. There, I was not on that committee. I seconded in a way that I read the minutes, but I was not at that meeting. So perhaps I could withdraw that, and somebody who was at the meeting could second that. That would be appropriate.
No, thank you. No problem. Thank you for raising that.
It's the 4th of March minutes. I've read them, but I was not at the meeting, and rightly it should be a person who was at the meeting to second you.
Okay.
I wasn't on the committee, by the way, at the time.
No, that's David, or is there anybody who was at the meetings of the last Standards Committee available to second those minutes?
Chair, Ron Whittle's indicated to speak. Councillor Whittle.
Ron, please, can you?
Yeah, I'll second them as the correct record.
Oh, thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. We had a bit of a misunderstanding. Okay, back to the current agenda. So just going back to what I've just said about bullying, the definition of bullying, use of social media, is that sufficiently covered? And should social media have a separate code in its own right, or should it be integrated into the existing code? Any views?
Chair, Councillor Whittle.
Councillor Little, please.
Yeah, on 10A, I think the requirements of how councillors behave on social media should be an integral part of the code rather than some separate document, really. Why would it be separate in that sense? You know what I mean? I think it should be, because otherwise you're going to have two separate documents. Let's have if you've got a code that we work to, then that should include what you do on social media as much as you do at public meetings or with constituents or whatever. You know, it's just, you know what I mean? It seems a bit daft keeping it separate.
Thank you. Any other views?
Hi, it's Paul.
Yeah. Hi, Paul.
Hiya. I think I agree with what just been said, actually. Much to the annoyance of my daughters, I don't do social media. I understand that from something I was involved with a couple of years ago, you may remember, that it can have quite an effect on certain people on certain times. So I think it should be incorporated in what previous caller was talking about. It is, I mean, I understand, I don't see it, I don't watch it, I don't read it, but I understand it's quite a powerful tool and that it puts information out there which not necessarily always correct at the time it goes out.
Okay, no, that's useful. Any other? I think there's somebody else indicating, or is that? Yeah.
Councillor Cornett, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I couldn't agree more with both speakers. I think Councillor Witter is absolutely right. If we start splitting it, then what will happen is you'll have another one and another one. So I think it's everything incorporated in together that would make sense, and it'll be a solid thing where everything's covered together rather than having to split. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see anybody else indicating, but I think those comments just made are quite useful in the sense that when we're looking at bullying and harassment, I think, I'm not sure, sorry, forgive me, somebody raised it earlier around bullying, harassment, and everybody, we need to deal with this together, and it overlaps. So maybe there is something about stating that because bullying and harassment can occur online as well as in person. So all of these things, I believe we need to maybe clarify a little bit further. We'll make those points. If I keep moving on, in terms of the next area is around registration and declaration of interest. Are there any questions? I mean, if you would like me to summarise, I can do that. It just talks about, you know, do we support the current requirements around declaration of interest? I don't know if Stuart or independent members want to come in and comment on any gaps that they see around gifts and hospitality and declarations of interest.
Chair, Alan Eastwood here. When I was monitoring officer, I really irritated members because what I said was declare everything. Even if you're a member of the RAC, the AA, National Trust, you know, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, Lancashire Wildlife Trust, declare it.
Yeah.
Just put it down on a sheet of paper, because one day that trust might well challenge the council as to some of its proposals. And you're open and honest on the face of the record. A lot of my members used to say, well, I can't be bothered. And I used to say, well, it's only going to take you 10 minutes. And if you can't be bothered, come into my office and I'll fill in it for you and let's go through everything. But there are so many areas that members just do not realise that someone who wants to criticise them gets a foothold. And so suddenly you find the RAC arguing against the fact there's going to be a new bypass round Blackburn, etc., etc. And suddenly you've got 60 members who are all members of the RAC and they've not declared it. And the RAC have got a foothold. Well, they didn't declare it. They've got no right to make any decision on this. They should declare an interest and step outside. And I just said, put it all down, everything. And then you're open and honest on the face of the record. And that's about being in public life.
I think that's really clear, that, Alan, and I couldn't agree more. Just put it all down. There's no harm in doing that. Yeah.
We've got Councillor Whittle indicating to speak, Chair.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, Chair. I think part of this is down to interpretation. I know at the beginning there's a little beginning of just before question 11. There's a thing about should declarations of interest not just include councillors and their spouses or partners or whatever, but include other members of their family or associates. And in fact, I've always interpreted what our annual declaration of interest actually included. I certainly put down where my son used to work. I mean, he's moved on now, but he used to work for a firm that did business with the council. So I naturally assumed that I'd have to declare that. I think maybe so I'm in agreement with it, but I thought my interpretation of it so far is that we've already had that. But if that needs to be made more explicit, then I'm in support of it.
I think you're an inspired councillor.
We agree.
I wonder about that. But
yeah, I mean, any other thoughts on that? Is that Stuart? Yeah.
Yes, it is, Chair. Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Again, in my experience with the declaring interests, we have different types of interests. We have disclosable peculiar interests. We have other interests. Some say quite rightly, well, about all interests. I think to some extent, I agree with that. The only thing I would suggest, though, is how far it goes and how far it goes in different circumstances. I think for members, it gets incredibly confusing. There are different types of interests, and to what extent do they declare? So again, in my experience, you would have members saying, well, how far do I go with this? And in the codes that I've had involvement with, it will actually say very clearly uncles, aunts, nephews, nieces, brothers, sisters, etc. So I think it would be good if it was just be very clear as to how far the interests have to be declared. You'll have members saying, well, I have a brother I haven't seen for 30 years and he might have an interest in such and such. Do I declare that? And then it becomes very difficult. So I think what I would suggest is we need to contain to some extent to how far do we go with these interests as far as family, friends and associates are concerned. I'd like to see that to be more clear.
Okay.
Stuart, you raised a really good, it's Alan here.
That's really good.
Chair.
Okay.
Stuart, you raise a really good point, but you don't know who you don't know. And I've dealt with several cases in other authorities than the one we're now in, where people had relatives who they'd had no involvement with for many, many years because of family rows and whatever, where the code found them wanting. And luckily, common sense prevailed and we threw them out. So you just do not know what's going to come through the woodwork. So what you do is, if on the face of the record, you declare the maximum that you're aware of, you are seen to be a good egg. And therefore, when you're challenged by someone who comes out of the woodwork, then you can say, but look, I did all that it was possible within my knowledge. And yes, I've got this cousin who I now find has got a contract with the council, but I've not spoken to him for 30, 40 years. So be it.
Are there any more views of that? Because it's raising quite a lot of thoughts in my head as well as you're all speaking. So, but before I speak, I'd like to bring in other members around the issue of how far do you go with declarations.
Hi, it's Paul Fletcher.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah. Couple of things, please, if I may.
Yes, of course.
The first is that there's a statement about, excuse me, registering with the monitoring officer any gift or hospitality with an estimated value of at least £25 within 28 days of receipt.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no statement about what you do with the values over £25. And
that's
whether
true.
You should, what would be appropriate value of money? Would it be £50? Would it be £1,000? Who determines whether it's a sum of money or an item of a gift that is acceptable?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, which is, I think it's much more difficult to monitor, it's been raised already, is it's not so much a gift, but it's an interest that you might have in something.
Yes, yes, yeah. And those are the questions running through my head at the moment. Any other comments? Okay.
No more indications, Chair.
Okay. I mean, just in terms of how far we go, there's a couple of thoughts that have just popped into my head as members are speaking, and I think we need to maybe factor them in somehow. One is in terms of, I agree that we should be sharing everything as much as possible, but just going back to Ron's point around family members, could there be, if we're not careful, a disproportionate impact in terms of declarations? Because I'm just thinking about my own family members, and when I completed my last NPPV police vetting level 3, I have got 11, well, there's 11 brothers and sisters. So, you know, how far do you go? How many of you are you in contact with? We've got extended families, so, and we're very close-knit families. So it's hard, it's very difficult, you know, to declare every single member of the family. So it is really about the code specifying who do we mean by family as well, because otherwise it could end up being quite having an adverse and disproportionate impact on those that have extended families and they class them as their immediate families. That's just one thought, and the other one is in terms of interest, in terms of work interest. You know, we all have different hats that we wear, and how far do we declare those values, if you would, if you've got an interest in LGBT agenda or a particular group around hate or disability group, how far do you declare that? I declare everything, that's my stance, that these are the things I'm involved in. But again, I do think we need some clarity on that, and I don't know if members agree with that of the committee or think that that's a little bit too far.
Chair, Councillor Rawat indicated to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think some clarity or further guidance would be really helpful. Now we're having this discussion. It's, you know, poses lots of questions in my mind. And I'm a relatively new councillor, second year in. So, you know, it's making me think, oh, you know, am I, you know, should I be, you know, recording more, or, you know, am I doing something in a different way, or am I thinking about things not enough, you know, that sort of thing. But I just think it, you know, further clarity may be helpful, or, you know, just a discussion with newer elected members to ensure that they are encompassing everything correctly. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Rawat. Nobody's indicating.
Chair, Alan Eastwood back again.
Yep.
I thought what you said was of great interest to me. I think in terms of family, there needs to be the caveat, as far as I am aware. And I think on the second point, you go to the extremes of declaration. You know, if you're in a small charitable group, put it down. It's just not a problem just to record it, and also it's a record on the face of what you're involved in. And if that group grows, then you've been exonerated from day one. Just put it down. And I think members, you know, my example was always the RAC, which no member ever thought of, or the AA, or, you know, any of them, because they are pressure groups against the government. And when I said that in training, you could see members go, oh, yeah, I need to do this, I need to do that. So I think declare it. And then you're open and honest in the face of the public.
Okay. Yeah, and I think maybe we need to get some clarity on that. I agree with openness, but it goes back to how far in terms of, do I declare points at Morrison's or Boots? You know, you understand where I'm going with this. It's just about the reasonableness of what we should declare. I'm quite happy to declare it all if that's what I'm guided to do. But like you said, you wouldn't immediately think to declare it. And so, you know, that you're a member of the RAC or the AA, you know, it might not be the immediate response to declare that.
No.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, I think going to having a loyalty card with Sainsbury's and Tesco's might be a little bit too far.
Oh,
but,
no, well, that's...
But the others are, you know, you are a member of that organisation. And as such, they will challenge a local authority.
Okay, no, that's useful. Thank you for that discussion. It's good to have air these out in this setting. Is there some?
Stuart?
Yeah, Stuart. Sorry.
Yeah, I think some of the key words being used is being a member. So if, say, you're a member of the National Trust, that might be something you put down. Whereas if you've got perhaps a loyalty card somewhere, you perhaps wouldn't say to yourself, actually, I'm a member of Morrison's or Sainsbury's. I just have a loyalty card. I think perhaps one of the key words here is being a member. I think that's what people are saying, if I can mention that.
I think, is Alan, Paul, you trying to come back in? Or
no,
is it just...
I agree with Stuart on that. You pay to be a member.
Okay.
And possibly that's the distinction. A loyalty card is something you sign up to in order to receive rewards, whereas the other is something you pay to in order to be a member of it. And I think that's good. Yeah, good one, Stuart.
No, thank you. No, that's a good point. Thank you. That's good. I'm glad we're recording the meeting because there's some really good points coming up here that hopefully David and Assad will be capturing. Is it okay if I move on? Are there any other? Oops,
Simon, sorry, I'll put a cue in.
Sorry, I didn't see.
No, it was just that I remember when I've asked legal for advice on should I declare things either at a particular meeting or in the annual statement that we have to sign. They always said the test was, in their mind, was what would the average man or woman on the Clapham omnibus think of you if you hadn't declared it or if you had declared it. I always found that amusing, actually, because I went to school in Clapham, so I've been on the Clapham omnibus many times. But I think what I took from that was that if you don't declare, you have to. It's a thought process. You have to go through thought process of what would somebody else from outside think of what I have or haven't declared. And if you haven't declared and it gets challenged, you have to have a good argument as to why you didn't. Now, I think the argument about the relative you haven't seen for 30 years is a reasonable argument that most people would understand. But obviously, you're taking a risk. If you feel that maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't declare, it probably is best to err on the side of declaring. But there will be times where somebody, you know what I mean. You do. I think that test of you should put it on, but if you choose to think no, that's too far away, at some stage you may have to justify that with a hopefully a reasonable minded person that would travel on the Clapham omnibus. Well, I think that's the only thing that we could go on all night about would this, would that, would this, would the other, and because we already make a distinction between things that we would declare on an annual statement, which are the big ones, but occasionally at meetings you think, oh, actually. I know somebody who's got land, who owns that piece of land, and you hadn't thought of it before. It never cropped up as, you'd never think that this particular patch of land in Darwin has got something to do with you. But you know what I mean? Because you can't predict what the issues that are going to come up in the forthcoming year, do you? You might say, oh, actually, I know somebody who owns that house or something. So you have to declare certain things on a as-you-go basis, and on the annual declaration, you have to go for the big ones that you can predict. For the future, can't you? I mean, that's the thing. So, but it is about a thought process, and you have to take that thought process seriously at the annual, when you put your annual declaration in, and at every meeting. When you see something coming up on the agenda, you think, oh, it might be as well that I mention that I know somebody there or something, and you stand to be judged on that, don't you? That judgment that you make.
Sure. Thank you there. I'm just thinking now, in light of the discussion we had, do we need to go back to item 3 and ask for declarations? But sorry, that's I know it's hard to have a joke on social media, isn't it? But anyway, let's carry on and let's motor on. I can't even offer you a drink. Apologies for that. Otherwise that could be a pecuniary interest, couldn't it, if I did? But this is the point. I think it's really important we do set that out, and I like what you just said there about membership of something. I think that's really useful, and I'm hoping David will note that and make sure we capture that, because it's a good way of thinking about it. And obviously the ordinary man, and is it Clapham bus, Ron? We'll try that test as well. Okay, can we, if everyone's okay with that, I'm going to just keep moving on a little bit. We're nearly there through the questions. I think it's about 17 in total, so we're not far off. In terms of inclusion of additional categories for registration, it's gone in there, and we've already discussed that, I think, unless anybody wants to comment around with, what should be included as categories for registration. Any thoughts on that from the independents before we move on, or all my members?
None from me, Chair Alan.
Thank you. I think we've covered it really, haven't we?
I think we've covered it, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. If we move on to 14, around gifts, I think we've alluded to that around gifts and their value. Is there, and so this is question 14 and 15, really, I'm merging them now. Do we want to discuss that further around, is it clear, what's clear around what gifts can be accepted as set out in obligation 11, or in terms of the draft code proposes £25 as the threshold for registering gifts and hospitality? Do we need any more debate on that? Or are there any thoughts on that? Nobody's indicating, so I think we're okay and we're happy with that.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I think it works well.
Okay, and Stuart, is that you? Let's
yes, well, I agree as well. I think £25 is a good figure to have. I think that's reasonable to keep it at £25.
Paul, I don't know I don't know your numbers. I just see numbers on my screen.
Okay, it's fine. I mentioned this before. I have no issue with the £25. It's when you go after that bothers me.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Paul? You broke up a little bit, and I didn't quite catch all of that.
I've got no issue with the £25. It's where you go from that gives me something. Do
you want to share that with us? What those issues are?
Well, it's what I mentioned before, is where does it end? If you declare £25, then what do you declare after that? What's the process within the authority for declaring something more than £25?
Okay. Okay? So we need to get some clarity on that. Any thoughts on that? I've never been given more than 25, or actually anything at all, to be honest. But I refuse if they did. Anybody got any thoughts?
Can I just suggest, Assad, do you want to pick this question up?
Sure. First of all, I think I was on the NLG webinar, and they were suggesting the £25 gift. They were also suggesting about having a cumulative amount of £100 per person. So basically, if you get it for the same person, 25. So you might get a £25 now of a donor, and you might get £25 again in a few months' time. Maybe another meal or whatever. And what they're saying is, if it commutes to £100, then that becomes another sort of interest.
Okay. That's useful. I think then some of these points we need to be aware of as members, because it may not be explicit enough. We can add that in those comments. Thank you, Assad. Any more comments? If not, I think we're almost at the end. No? Okay, so question 16, just quickly, it's just about accompanying guidance to the code, and which of the following types of guidance would we like to see, and it's really just ranking them in order of preference. So I don't propose we do too much on this, but has anybody got any clear opinion what should be right at the top? And I'm going to start with our independents. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, because we do value your guidance on this. Do you have a particular order in mind?
Well, Chair, Stuart.
Yeah.
Well done, Stuart. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is just obviously my view. I like guidance. I like explanatory guidance. So I'd probably put that one as number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to go through the order? I mean,
yes, please. That would be useful, and that'd be a really good starting point.
Yeah, I'll probably go explanatory guidance number 1. case studies and examples of good practice. If I remember rightly, looking at this in the past, that used to be quite helpful. I put that as number 2. As a lawyer, I'd obviously bring in case law. I put that at number 3.
Okay.
Number 4 would be improvement support materials. And then number 5, supplementary guidance, social media. That would be the order I would suggest.
Thank you for that.
I've no disagreement with that. I think that's fine.
Okay. Unless there's disagreement, please speak now or hold your peace, wherever. God, I'm trying very hard. I desperately want to see you all, you know, but I can only see your initials on my screens and numbers. Anyway, question 16 and 17. Is there any other guidance you think we should be developing or the LGA should be developing? That's 16, sorry, question 16A, other than what we've just highlighted there, or is it, I think is there everything there that we need?
I think Paul Fletcher, sorry, I think the LTA will develop the guidance based on the responses they get by the middle of August, whenever it is. So they may well expand what they've really done.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Whittle.
Please.
It's all right. It's been done.
Okay.
Chair.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Asad here. I think some guidance on information governance will be helpful as well.
Okay.
Councillors.
Good. Yeah, that would be good. We'll add that into our comments then. Thank you. And final question: is there anything further about any comments at all in general comments that we need to add on?
Chair, it's Asad here again.
Asad?
Yeah, I think it's already been mentioned earlier on this meeting about the lack of sanctions.
Yeah.
I think that's an obvious one.
Yeah, I was going to raise that, so thank you for that.
It sort of lacks teeth. The whole sort of code lacks teeth.
I agree. Any thoughts on that and the lack of sanctions? And I mean, David, correct me if this debate needs to happen when we look at the ethical standards where they talk of sanctions, and we can have this discussion at the next meeting, or would you like some discussion now if it helps you feed back to the LGA?
I think, Chair, as Asad has indicated, there was originally, we thought that the code was going to include some more issues relating to a higher sanction. But it appears that in this particular guidance again, and I think you've heard one or two comments that have come through indicating that it lacks teeth, I think the phrase that has been used. So I think if it is something that members, and this is where I think it is important to get the two views from our independents, but also from yourselves as elected members, whether you believe strongly that we should be making that point.
Can I, Paul, please come in.
Yeah. I mean, this has been discussed a number of occasions in the past on the existing conduct, etc. I think it's definitely got to have some form of teeth over and above what it has at the moment. Those sanctions have to be clear to everybody, so everybody understands the significance of their actions or whatever.
Thank you for that. No.
Chair, Councillor Whittle has indicated.
Thank you. Can you, Ron? Thank you.
Yeah, I know in the document that you go through on the link, it does talk about. I can't remember the exact word. There were two paragraphs about it, about being excluded from council committees or from council, executive posts, presumably. Which I think, because I seem to recall, we've actually got already. But I suppose at the moment the only thing other than that would be sort of your reputation. I mean, it's not something I do in any election campaign, but presumably, if it's as long as it's accurate, people could mention it about their opponents, couldn't they? That they were found guilty by the standards committee of, I don't know, bullying or inappropriate behaviour or something. I mean, that would be, presumably people could use that, but as I say, that's the sort of politics I don't really get involved in, unless it was something really serious. I thought it was sufficiently serious. on discrimination or something. But yeah, no, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people would think that there should be more teeth to the code, and that if people, you know, break the rules that they've signed up to, then the sanctions should be there, you know. But I don't know what they will be actually, because I think it all gets very murky when you're talking about people that have been elected, aren't they? You know,
Yeah.
We haven't got impeachment, have we? I mean,
no. Again, can I come to the independence? And I'm, you know, because I might have misunderstood that there are some best practice recommendations potentially around 6-month suspension and some kind of sanctions. So if I could bring in our independence, that'd be great.
Chair, it's Alan here.
Hi, Alan.
Now I'm not employed directly by any local authority. I bring on a little bit of a political head.
Mm-hmm.
And given how difficult political parties find it to recruit people to stand to public office, to then think that you're going to say, if you put a foot wrong, you're going to be sanctioned in a number of different ways, is going to make it even more difficult to get anybody to stand in a democratic process. And that, to me, is the strength of the British backbone. And being a local government officer for 30 years, more 40 years, I just think it is democracy, the best example of democracy in the Western world. So the moment you bring in heavy sanctions, nobody's going to come forward. You're going to give up a job, you're going to get a pittance of an allowance, and you're going to be pilloried from every dale and every mountain. However, what you should realise is that if you do put your foot wrong and you've gone into local government for the wrong reasons, then there must be something which stops you behaving in a political way. In a particular way, sorry,
yeah.
Not political. And already most parties have a very strong whip and mechanisms whereby they want to uphold integrity and behave in the best ways possible. And in a way, the code never acknowledges that. As a monitoring officer, if I had a particular problem with a particular councillor, before I would move to going through the code, unless someone had made a complaint, I would speak to the leaders of that party and say, is this acceptable to you in your constitution? And more often than not, they would say, no. Can we meet them together and have a discussion and resolve a very difficult situation? That wasn't a sanction, but it certainly was, you know, someone being brought up sharp as to unacceptable behaviour or something that they'd done wrong. And what I hope to do is build a confidence that members would come forward and say, oh, I've been in the meeting, I've got this wrong, there will be complaints, how do we deal with this, what do we do? And you would resolve it. But to have a sanction like not attending meetings, not having the way, not having this, you know, the parties do that themselves. They want to uphold integrity. So we've got to be really careful on having something which is, well, expunging them from...
Sorry, are you still there? It's okay, though. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I've just moved my soapbox and stood back on the floor.
But important points there. Any other comments? And apologies for the cat. I can't. Yeah, that's in the screen now.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, Chair.
Yes, of course. Sorry, Chair. Sorry,
yeah.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, my view on this is, I think the sanctions should be there for the wrongdoing, and they should be appropriate in the circumstances and clearly set out that certain wrongdoing would lead to certain sanctions. And I think it needs to be clear that people do put a foot wrong. People are not perfect. And where that happens, and they've stepped out of line, then in my view, members should be brought to account and the appropriate action taken. But that, in many cases, need only be a light touch, a conversation, an apology would be sufficient. And I would not want to go back to the situation we had years ago, where something that's not terribly serious has gone all the way through hearings and a lot of upset for very little outcome. However, what I would like to see, and I think I'm more with the LGA on this, is there should be something there in the background on the shelf that the member knows that in very, very terrible circumstances of dishonesty and bringing the council in disrepute or severe bullying, where it's really quite serious, where perhaps we're involved, with a lot of money, then I think the ultimate sanction should be there. I think the LGA is saying suspension for up to 6 months. I think that certainly should be something that I would like to see. But again, I mean, I agree with Alan to some extent. It is difficult to get councillors, but councillors should be aware when they really do step out of line, where a situation is bad, then the council itself should be in a position to deal with that member, and that member shouldn't still be involved in council business in certain severe situations.
I agree entirely with what Stuart just said. I mean, sanctions aren't there to press against somebody who's not been to a meeting. They're there for more serious offences than that. And I just support everything Stuart said.
Yeah.
Okay. Any views from the committee members or council members?
Hi, James Assad here again. I also think we need to have more sort of public confidence in our arrangement system, because I think some of the complaints myself and David have come across, people have always said, hang on, how come you haven't suspended this council? And we have to go back and say, sorry, we can't, by law we can't. And they find that very frustrating.
Okay.
So I think I do agree that in severe cases, we do need to have these type of sanctions.
I mean, there's nobody indicated to speak, so I am of the opinion that there should be sanctions for the severe cases. And I'm talking the severe cases, not the she said, he said, or perceptions of something, because that is, I totally agree with that. That can be very political. We might have nobody on the council if that was the case. But certainly when we talk about child abuse, clear cut out bullying, racism, homophobia, real clear cut out. And I'm not talking about, like I said, as she said, and the verbal differences of opinion. So there should be some sanctions, otherwise we are teethless, and it is difficult, and the public don't have confidence in what's the point of the Standards Committee. I do hear that a lot as chair of the Standards. So whether that's the view of other members, I would like to obviously open that up for discussion. Is there any opinion, or we'll put it out by email, make sure all members can comment? Would they like to have see more sanctions available in the severe end of cases, where really it would just, like you said, the reasonable person would not expect that councillor to continue?
Chair, don't forget that in the extreme cases, the law still stands.
Yeah,
and what we're talking about is sanctions for low levels, where someone feels very aggrieved, who's taken the trouble to complain and wants to see something done. But the majority of cases don't want to see a member suspended, because then, that would become a political weapon time and time again, and you'll get a plethora of complaints. What they want, more often than not, is the councillor to say, sorry, got it wrong, I apologise. And a lot of councillors find that really, really difficult, and find that the hardest sanction of them all.
Okay, any others? Yes, is that Stuart?
Chair,
yeah.
I agree entirely with that. I think that's what I've been saying. I think Alan and myself, I think we're on the same page as on this one, for sure we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Chair, Councillor Watt.
Yep. Please.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. I think obviously in severe cases, and I think there just need to be, and we need to ensure that sanctions are in place if there is a decision to go to, following a sanction process. But I think it might be something to think about is having opportunities for councillors to really reflect on if something has gone wrong, for them to go away, do some reflection, and then obviously maybe share with their peers on how they may change their behaviors, what they might be adapting going forward, because I think obviously we are elected members and we need to review and reflect on what we're doing all the time, because things are changing, and we all are human and may make errors and do things with the best of intentions, and you may make a mistake. And I think it's just having that opportunity to reflect and review, and as maybe as part of your own political group, is do some reflection or review something, and your peers could review you. It doesn't have to be the opposition. You could do like a peer review, and then that way we all have the opportunity to reflect and learn. But yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you for the comment. Any other thoughts on that? There are going to be difference of opinion on this. Should we have sanctions, to what extent? So really we need to kind of put that down on paper to say there are differing opinions, and really I don't want to be the one to say that we should have an absolute sanction. I'm very much with the educate, and I'm going to sound like police officer now, educate, encourage before we enforce, and really it's about engaging members. So please, can we think about some of those ideas of engagement, as Councillor Rawat has just highlighted a couple there, and that I think that would be useful. And if we can have those tools to our disposal, they might not be quite sanctions, but they are tools to ensure differences can be resolved, or local resolution mechanisms can be implemented. And only in the severe cases, as I think one of our independents and others have said, there are criminal sanctions available in those cases. Assad, do you have any comment on that in terms of, as members, as a monitoring officer, where do you sit on this in terms of what you would like available to you? Or David, indeed.
I think, Chair, it's probably been summed up really well by the debate. I think at the end of the day, the issue about integrity of members in the eyes of the electorate, and that's where a lot of this comes from, in terms of when we do get complaints, and if those complaints are justified, then the electorate likes to be able to see that at least whatever sanction you put in place is something that does seek to correct the behaviour and ensure that the member doesn't repeat that going forward. So from a monitoring officer perspective, the key thing for me, and as Alan and Stuart have both said, if there is a issue at the very, very serious end, then we have the law that actually deals with the issue for us. But I do think that there should be, as we've talked about there, some more specific examples of what could be reasonable sanctions for those, things that, people get wrong from time to time, and therefore there should be some form of corrective sanction. I mean, we often get, obviously everybody talks about the most serious end, but the reality is most complaints can be dealt with by the member acknowledging that you have made a mistake on this occasion. You don't need to do anything greater than apologise and acknowledge that with a member of the public or whoever it may be. But I do think that we do need to be absolutely clear that the current regime doesn't really have any teeth unless you're at the extreme. And my view would be that there should be some strengthening of the sanctions, but not to any, to take any, to go to the extreme, as it were, more to deal with the issue at the present time where people feel that the sanctions are too much the other way.
Could I just make one more comment in light of the discussion in terms of we are in a political arena and there will be people, well, when nobody's going to like everybody and everybody's not going to hate everybody and so forth. So, so we're going to have, we may well have what we call the vexatious type complainants. And there may be something we need to include into that to help protect members as well, to say, look, we're not just here to hit you over the head. If people are then coming along and making for political reasons allegations, then we need to have something to support the members as well, just to get that balance right. Is there any thought on that?
Alan here again.
Alan, thank you.
From an officer point of view, what is political is often difficult to identify because we try always to be apolitical, and what you see as political doesn't quite hit us between the eyes like it does you, because you know the background and other issues that have gone on, and that's a difficult one for an officer to do an objective report on something which is political, when it could be quite sublime in the way it's delivered.
Okay, yeah. No, I see what you're saying. We have to very much go off the facts of what is being said. Absolutely. Rather than, yeah, okay. So that's, I think we've got some really good points there, if you don't mind me saying, even though we're remote and we can't see each other. I think you can all see me though, can't you?
We can, Chair, yes.
Great, that's good. I think you all saw my cat for a brief moment as well then. I do apologise. I can't kick him off. He's huge, honestly. He's like a tiger, a lion. He is, honestly. He's bigger than me. Anyway, I think that concludes our substantive item, really. And I really thank you for everybody's contributions there. And if anybody just wants to, because it is difficult, and I do want to make sure I have included everybody, is there anybody else who wants to say anything at all on any of those areas that we've discussed before we move on to item 5?
Chair, it's Alan again.
Yes.
Who is old enough to have been involved in the building of the current code of conduct. And we went through all of what we're going through now. And, we went word by word, sentence by sentence, turned it over, rewrote it. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is common sense. The code is common sense and people respecting one another and behaving well.
No, I think that sums it up nicely there. Thank you, Alan. Was Stuart, Paul, what have you? Your phone flashed? Yep.
Yes, Chair. Stuart here. The only thing I think I would like more clarity on in this this draft code is just make it crystal clear to members on participation in meetings. Maybe even if it's a flow chart. I'm not one for lots of flow charts, particularly in a code, but maybe if it's an appendix or something like that, as to when they can and cannot speak in meetings, when they can speak in meetings as a member of the public, kind of. That would be good, because when members are in the heat of the moment, and indeed even when they've been advised, if there's a flow chart there or something that can quickly look at, that would be very helpful. These things can get unnecessarily complicated, and it's easy enough for us to just say to members, well, just don't take part in the meeting and that's it. And that's a very easy way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's more to it than that. And I think it would be very helpful if that was crystal clear in the code.
Thank you. I take it, David Assad, you got all the points, and or somebody's busy. recording or scribing away.
Yes, we've got people taking the notes for us to pick up all the points, Chair.
I wasn't sure if you wanted me to do it, that would be, considering my writing is ineligible, and so is my typing. Lots of red lines underneath. Okay, we've got item 5, if that's okay. Sorry, no more comments yet? I can move on? Yeah, I take that as a yes. Item 5, local government ethical standards. It's an item for noting, and I'm just going to bring David into this to sum it up.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is proposed to be a substantive item for your next meeting. It's based on the fact that the Committee on Standards in Public Life, when it made the recommendations in the report, which is now, strangely, it's January 2019 that the time goes. But in that report, they identified some best practice recommendations, which were around setting a benchmark for good ethical practice, and which they would expect every local authority should implement and aspire to. So myself and Assad will be looking at this over the next few weeks to check out each of those best practice recommendations and ensure that they are currently enshrined within our procedures, and where they are not, to come back to your next meeting and suggest proposals for how they may be incorporated. From our initial review, we have the majority of these issues covered, but you may wish to take a view about strengthening in certain areas as well, and we'd like to give you that opportunity to consider that as well. So what we would like members to do is to receive the report, to review the list of best practice, and when you get opportunity, have a look at our current code and our current process for handling complaints, so that when we come back at our next meeting, we can then go through each one of the best practice elements and ensure that you're happy our code reflects it positively. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. I won't ask for commentary now, because we are going to have this as a substantive item. The best practice is there in front of you, so it's homework for you. But we've got 3 months, haven't we, David, for this bit? I'm not sure when the next standards meeting is, if it's going to be on the exact same day. It might be worth noting the dates. Okay, thank you for that. Item 6, we'll move on to item 6, which is a complaints update. David, hand back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report brings the public reporting of the complaints fully up to date up to the 30th of June, and outlines the complaints received and how they have been managed. And at the moment, there are no further complaints. Happy to take any questions or the reports for noting. Thank you, Chair.
There's no questions or comments from me. Is there any from any of the members or our independent colleagues as well?
Chair,
nothing from me, Chair.
Yeah.
As the independent person for your standards committee and an independent person for some other standards committees, Blackburn with Darwin have the utmost integrity, and their members are exemplars, as far as I can see, of upholding standards in public life.
Thank you for that. That's really good to know. And if there's no more, I think that's it, isn't there? David, Assad, is there anything else either of you would like to say, or any of our members?
So we've nothing further, Chair,
okay.
for this evening's agenda.
In that case, that concludes the meetings of the standards held on the 20th of July 2020. It was our first virtual meeting. I think we did okay, no major disasters. But thank you everybody for your contributions, and I just want to wish you all a good evening, and hopefully soon we can meet in person again. But for the time being, this is how it's going to be.
Well chaired.
Thank you. That was hard. That was a new one for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody.
Well done, Simon. Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.
Bye. everybody.